I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, the guest that produces this fine publication, the Solari Report. This is the second quarter wrap-up. It is so new that I don't even have the publication. I just got the cover art. It's fabulous. I did read a lot of it. I didn't read all of it. It's very detailed. It's fabulous stuff. We're not going to be able to get to it all, but I do have the publisher of that, Catherine Austin Fitts. Catherine Austin Fitts, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Hey, Greg, it's great to be back. You know, I've been traveling a lot for the last couple months, and every time something wild happened, I'd say, I got to talk to Greg about this.
Well, your resume is a deep resume. You're a financial advisor. Is that the correct terminology? Financial advisor?
I'm an investment advisor.
Investment advisor.
Okay.
Published the Solari Report, former assistant housing secretary at HUD. So you got to be handled $300 billion, something like that, of assets. You know big numbers, you know big stuff. Just want to kind of give a little bit of your resume to start here. And I want to start with the emerging markets. I was on the phone to Michael Penta, who's going to be a guest coming up with me, and it's the prediction of this thing going south is here. You had a really good, in the pre-interview, you had a really good simple explanation of what's going on in the emerging markets in our global financial system. Could you give us that?
Sure. What you're looking at is a form of reverse globalization. So the United States has passed new tax law and new policies that is repatriating capital and operations. And I described it a little bit like a human body when it goes into trauma. Greg, it draws the blood back from the toes and the fingers to the heart and lungs and the brain. It draws it back to central. So what happens is, as the money pulls out, it leaves the weaker credits, if you will, and then you start to have real pain. So if you look at a series of what is now being referred to as the submerged emerging markets, you've got a series of countries that have rising unemployment and their currencies are dropping pretty significantly. So we see drops everywhere from 18% in Russia year to date to Venezuela, which is down 99.9%. I just tweeted out a little chart, which I sent you on the drops. But so they're really feeling the pain, and as we draw the capital back to sort of protect our operations and draw manufacturing back. This is not just a change in federal policy. Part of it is, if you look at the really big economic juggernauts right now in the globe, so you have China and you have the United States, they now can implement manufacturing with robotics and artificial intelligence. And that dramatically changes what they need from other countries, whether it's reducing the demand for natural resources or outsourcing capacity. And so you see the drawing back of more manufacturing into the United States. And so the capital, whether it's the income or the reinvestment of the funds that have been sitting in cash, is protecting. It's protecting the juggernauts and building the juggernauts, and the sort of the extremities at the fringe of empire are losing their advantages.
When you say, you had mentioned this term, which is kind of descriptive, Fortress America. We are becoming Fortress America. Would you explain that, please?
Sure. So from World War II on, we operated through the Bretton Woods system, and the attractor in the Bretton Woods system was the American consumer. And America rose, our power rose after World War II based on the Navy controlling the sea lanes. It was an open trade model. Everybody wanted to trade. We protected the trade routes, hence our power, hence the reserve currency. And we had sort of globally an open model. The Bretton Woods system is breaking down. You're seeing a lot of blame given to the current administration. The reality is the Bretton Woods system has been breaking down for a while, and the acceleration of that breakdown was expected. And that's why you're seeing so much renegotiation of a lot of the trade agreements, trying to keep the Bretton Woods system economic. Because the way the world works is you have a benefit from being the reserve currency and getting lots of natural resources cheap. At the same time, you have very expensive military expenses, and you've got to run it. So the money you're spending for military or running the system is less than the benefit you're getting. And that's why you see all this sort of anxiety and trying to cut the deal. Now, what I believe was one of the key drivers in the election was you had two factions of the American establishment, and one of them wants to pull back behind the oceans into Fortress America. Now with drones and other technology, you can project power not by running a global military, but by using drones and space weaponry and other things to project power just from North America. So there's a rebuilding of the base. Part of that, as I said, is bringing, now with robotics and AI, you can bring a tremendous amount of the manufacturing and operations you need for national security back into North America. So what you're seeing is a consolidation of the base back into North America and making North America strong. So whichever way the sort of the acceleration of the end of the Bretton Woods system happens and we shift to a multipolar world, America can be effective in that world. And it's really, if you look at what's happening in the federal budget, it's a real dance between getting the Bretton Woods system to continue and go and the reserve currency to continue and go versus rebuilding, whether Trump calls it Make America Great Again or I call it Fortress America. You're doing something that from the vantage point of the concrete businesses make a whole lot more sense. Now, I don't think anybody ever built a powerful anything by stripping their base, which is what was happening and what the other faction wanted to do, continue to strip the base on the theory that you could keep the global game going. I don't think it was going to work, and clearly there was a lot of smart people in the military who didn't think it could keep working either.
That's Sue back Donald Trump. One of the things that you said in the pre-interview, and I'm sorry, we're going to get to your because this plays into what we're talking about the setup.
Absolutely.
One of the things that you talked about, I want 2 points before we're going to get to that. I want to get to this point. You said that we're going to have some. You're the person that was telling me, no, we're not going to have a crash in 2013. We're not going to have a crash in 2014. I thought we'd have a crash in 2015. You said, not really. 2016 election year, 2017. Then you started turning, and this latest time that you said, which is unusual for you because you're my marker, man. You're my ding 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 ding. Catherine Olsen Fitz said what? And you said, we're going to take some big hits between now and the end of the year. Would you explain that, please? Because coming from you, that's a big deal.
Well, first of all, you see the world moving to build liquidity around the dollar. Now, they've been doing it quietly for years, but now it's accelerating. So we just saw the German finance minister a few weeks ago, Greg, say it's time to create an alternative to SWIFT. If you look at the payment mechanisms globally around the world, the U.S. has an enormous advantage, and it's one of the reasons we have the power to implement financial sanctions. We really use the financial system quietly to deliver a lot of control. If you look at the countries that are losing capital as capital pulls back, they're more often than not countries that have irritated the U.S. or G7. So, we use the financial system as an enforcement arm, whether it's to preserve the U.S. dollar or to sort of get our way in a variety of different ways. And that power is diminishing. We don't see that yet in the price of the U.S. dollar and the U.S. dollar index vis-a-vis other currencies, but it's coming. You just saw a couple of the big names in the financial industry come out and say the dollar could drop significantly over the next few years, and we could really run into a structural crisis. Right now, the dollar is the economists called it dangerous and dominant. It's still, if you look at the market share of reserves around the world, is very, very significant portion of total reserves. So it's still very important. And at the same time, the U.S. dollar hegemony is probably not going to last forever unless we have some kind of miracle in terms of black budget and invisible and space weaponry. And who knows what the truth is there. So I think the long-term dollar looks very weak. Short-term, it doesn't look like it's coming apart anytime soon as far as I can see. Now, what that means is when you have something that's dangerous and dominant, you have the possibility of extreme volatility events. Okay, that's the new code word for the you-know-what hits the you-know-what. And, whether it's different countries sort of exploding economically or we pressuring people in a way that makes them very uncomfortable. These kinds of fights over shrinking pies are very dangerous because they mean covert wars, they mean overt wars, And the more we steal pies from each other as opposed to bake new pies, the worse the situation gets. And that's what you're seeing. So the system is not stable. We've had, with the 10th anniversary of the bailouts, we've had all sorts of discussion in the press about why the system still isn't as stable as it could be. One of the reasons is the U.S. stuck the debt to the taxpayers. Europe didn't take the taxpayers didn't get the hit from the banks. So the question is how you manage the European banks. But the other question is, I would say the damage to the credibility of the Anglo-American Alliance financial liquidity and financial system was significant. And it hasn't, the confidence hasn't returned. The trust is not there. And the question is, how are we going to rebuild trust? Now, interestingly enough, Trump has built trust certainly among the small business in the heartland. And so the businesses that do concrete things like oil and gas or agriculture, there's a much higher trust now as a result of the policies and sort of communications of the Trump administration, no matter how passionate they are. The other faction who was feeding off of the subsidy is obviously pretty grumpy, and on occasion the people that they're funding are getting pretty violent. So the trust is not there in the system, and the system is not in alignment. One of the reasons I believe the system is not in alignment is there's absolutely no disclosure about how the money really works and how the money's worked for the last 20 years. So people's understanding of what's happening and why mathematically is absurd. And don't start me about the entrainment and fake news of the media. God bless you and USA Watchdog and anybody who provides an alternative. So I think the American people are remarkably divorced from an accurate map of how things have really worked for the last 20 years and how we can right them so that they can go forward. One of the reasons I voted for Trump is Trump's done more in the last 10 years or 5 years or 1 year to get Americans talking about the truth. He's moved the bar on what's socially acceptable to talk about. And, he's taking a lot of heat for that.
I want to. So, could we take? Could the stock market fall apart? Could the dollar? You say it doesn't look like it's going to come apart anytime soon. Could the dollar take a hit? Could gold vault higher? Could gold vault lower? Could the stock market crash? I mean, when you say take a hit, what's the hits we're going to take?
Here's the thing: anything is possible, and that's why this situation argues for balance. The one thing we know is the fixed income market is now. The long-term bull market in bonds is over, even though interest rates are high and, bonds look from an interest rate standpoint a little bit more attractive. But the credit quality issues in the fixed income market are pretty significant. So the real push is to real assets, whether it's real assets reflected in a stock or real assets reflected by real estate or precious metals. And so if you look at anyone in the financial world, they're all pushing towards real assets. I'm always bringing up the land report, which is the report of the 100 largest landowners in America. Since 2008, the holdings of the top 100 landowners in America has doubled, Greg, doubled. Okay, so everybody's buying real stuff, and that includes the stock market. There are a lot of stocks that represent real stocks and real operations that can generate cash. The push politically is going to be towards building a global equity model. So we've been on a debt model, and there's going to be tremendous push, including from the central bankers, to push for an equity model. And it's one of the reasons I think you see the central banks around the world buying stocks for their reserves. So instead of buying U.S. treasuries, the Swiss National Bank has been one of the leaders of building stocks. We had a report in 2017 from the BIS looking at the debt problem and said anything we could do to encourage equity is really important. And I don't know if you remember this, our wrap-up 3 years ago was called Planet Equity, and we talked about it. We did one called Planet Debt and one on Planet Equity and said there's going to be enormous push globally to try and strengthen the equity model because think of this as, let's say you buy a house and the value of the house goes down and now your mortgage is underwater. You can either renegotiate the mortgage or you can do things to build up the equity. And so all around the world, what we see is efforts to write down the debt. I told you yesterday the Zimbabwe airport just got taken over by the Chinese because the government make a debt repayment, right? There you go. So we see the write down of the debt, but we also see every effort to mark up the equity. And if you look at what Trump and the administration has been saying, what they've been talking about is what do we do to grow the equity in America? We've got to grow our way out of this. And the whole idea of Make America Great Again is, okay, how do we re-engineer what we're doing to grow our equity? If you go back and read my Dylan Reed article, it's exactly what I wrote in the 90s. If you look at what we were doing at Hamilton Securities, we were proposing and prototyping the re-engineering of government flows county by county to dramatically improve equity. And that's the little secret here. If you look at the current cash flows, the day you stop stripping North America and decide, okay, how can we truly make the real assets and the real people in America fundamentally productive? The potential, given new technology, for, phenomenal wealth is there. Now, if you engineer the system so all that wealth goes to a few insiders at the top, then nobody trusts the systems and you get the mess we have now. If you want to know where the inequality came from, it came from the $21 trillion.
I want to hold on.
$21 trillion financing insiders to do whatever they want and make themselves rich.
And we're going to bring that up in just a second. I want to do one last one last question. We get to that's my next question. Is the global financial powers worried about Erdogan in Turkey saying we're not paying, or the people in Argentina, we don't want your loan, we're not paying, we can't pay this back? Are they worried about a daisy chain of defaults, much like Puerto Rico came out and said, that's $74 billion, we're not paying it, which is why they didn't. They had to depend on federal help.
Here's what the war is. You're talking about the financial symptoms. You're not talking about the war. So let's go back. The Bretton Woods system was a maritime empire. Okay, the U.S. Navy, and before them the British Navy, but the Anglo-American alliance controlled, because they controlled the sea lanes in an open trade model where the U.S. consumer was the attractor. Now you have the European Union, whose middle class is double the size of America, and you have Asia, whose middle class by 2030, if the Brookings Institute is right, is going to be 10 times the American middle class. And what's between them? Yes, there's some ocean between them, but there's a land empire. And what Xi Jinping and China and Asia are doing is they are building the roads and they are building the railroads that mean Europe and Asia can trade with each other at high speed. Now, hold that thought for a second. Let's look at per capita income. If the per capita income today in China is $10,000 to $15,000 and the per capita income in America is $60,000 and in Switzerland it's $80,000, if you build a land empire between Europe and Asia, as Asia is going from 15,000 up to 60,000, converging with the G7, what's going to happen? You're going to have the Silk Road Europe and Asia is going to get together and cut you out. So, if you look at the last 10 years, we're having wars over all the land, Eurasia, that's sitting between Europe and China, the Ukraine, Turkey, Iran. That's what this fight is about. Who's going to control the Silk Road? And is the Silk Road going to support the Anglo-American alliance, or is it going to support a Europe and a China getting together? Russia, of course, being umbrellaing both of them in the middle, or from Europe to Asia. Are they all going to get together and cut you out? That's what this war is about. And all these different squabbles about this debt or that debt, it's all part of this. And of course, this is why Xi Jinping is making the One Belt, One Road initiative such a huge priority for the Chinese. Now, hold that thought for a second, and let's get to the rise of the Asian consumer.
Well, wait, stop. Let's go back to the 21 trillion. Let's go back to the 21 trillion.
Let me finish. Let me finish this, and then we'll go. Okay. Right. So for 2 decades, China has been buying treasuries, and then we've taken that money and gone down to Walmart, handed subsidies out, and then go down to Walmart and buy Chinese goods, and around you go. So China has been exporting deflation and financing us, labor deflation, into the United States. Now, instead of buying treasuries and financing our trade deficit, China says, no, I'm not going to finance you. I'm going to finance building a land empire, which is an alternative to your Bretton Woods system, in a way that makes us beaucoup money. And what does that do? That means China's now financing the rise of the Asian consumer and the rise of a land empire. And what is that doing? That's exporting inflation. I just had a great interview with John Williams of Shadow Stats, who I know you have on. Real inflation in this country is running at 10%. And one of the reasons is, Asia is no longer exporting deflation in this country. It's exporting inflation. So, and this brings us back to the 21 trillion. You just saw both the Council on Foreign Relations and the Economist publish articles saying the West got China wrong. Well, why did they say that? Because we financed China. In other words, we built this juggernaut. We financed this juggernaut. In fact, our establishment has big equity positions in the success of the Chinese juggernaut. And, so we're in this situation. You can say, did we get it wrong or did we get it right? I don't know. I think it was you who said, wasn't it you said to me that one of the leaders at Goldman Sachs said, well, China's going to win. It's inevitable.
No.
So we have a lot of people in the American establishment over the last 20 years who've basically taken our pension fund money and our tax money, including, I would say, the 21 trillion that has disappeared from the U.S. government, and used it to bet against us by betting on Asia.
That's another thing that I wanted to bring up, that now the federal government has basically, as in the middle of August, you brought this up in the pre-interview, the federal government has basically said, well, any black budgets or any national security issues, anything, you don't get to know where this 21 trillion went.
So let's look at the dance.
Just so people know, this is Dr. Mark Skidmore came up with this with you, and take a look at government numbers that were available on the internet, which have been removed. So let me describe
and
they came up with 21 trillion missing from the DOD and HUD. Okay.
Right. So let me describe the history, and then I'll describe what DOD or the federal government has just done. So for 20 years, I've been sort of pounding the drums about the money going missing from the Department of Defense and HUD. It's what's called undocumentable adjustments. So if you look at the laws related to the federal government in the Constitution and financial management laws, they've been in complete defiance. I mean, just complete flat out defiance. It's almost as if you told the IRS, I just don't feel like filing with you this year, So I had the missing money up to $12 trillion. And then I got a wonderful call from a professor at Michigan State University, Dr. Mark Skidmore, a really very solid scholar, who said, would it help if I and my graduate students went through surveyed all the documents at HUD and DOD to really ascertain, okay, what's the state of the undocumentable adjustments? Because I had never done a complete survey. It's a big job. So they did, and to their shock and amazement, they came up with another 9 trillion to make it a total of 21 trillion. When they gave that number, Greg, one of the reasons the number was so amazing was it was bigger than the entire U.S. debt. So think of it this way. We sell $5 trillion of Treasury funds to our pension funds and then turn around and disappear the money out the back door when the pension fund beneficiaries as taxpayers are liable for the $5 trillion. It's a very neat laundry trick. Anyway, so we published it, and we published the documents with it. And as you know, the DOD and IG took some of those documents down, but we had them on our servers. And so we've been able to keep it all public at missingmoney.solier.com. And that means that the journalists in the real news can go and easily get all the documents and get the citations pretty quickly and duplicate all the work that Dr. Skidmore and his students did. And he's also written up some very credible reports. So the reaction was quite amazing. The first reaction, as you know, was a week or two later that it was announced that 100 fire trucks were at the New York Fed because somebody was using a fireplace in the basement that hadn't been used for a while, and a fire broke out on the roof. So when you have fires at the depository for the U.S. government, it does make you wonder. Anyway, so then announced there was a huge announcement that there was going to be a complete audit, and now the Trump administration is going to do a complete audit, and everything was going to be fine because they're on it. Now, as I pointed out, I'm a lot more interested in where the 21 trillion went and getting it back for the taxpayers, as opposed to, doing an audit for the years subsequent to when the $21 trillion went missing. So if your bank had lost 21,000 of your money, you would not. The fact that they were going to do an audit next time, you would not rest easy. You want your $21 trillion back. So anyway, so they came out with, and if you look at the push of announcing or describing the audit, was very impressive, very professionally done, big deal about this, satisfied all the sort of fake news media. Well, then it comes out, and you can find these links up on my website. I'll put them up when I put up your interview. The Federal Accounting Standards Board, Dr. Skidmore pushed for an explanation of the missing money. And we got a document from the Inspector General's office, Greg, that was something I had never seen and he had never seen. I didn't even know it could happen. It was an analysis of the issue, and every number in the document had been redacted. They were all classified, the whole document. Okay, so then the Federal Accounting Standards Board comes out with a new policy, because apparently the people leading the audit have come to them and said, we have a problem here. If we do this audit, it's going to disclose classified projects. So the board came out with a new policy, which I say is illegal. You can't do it under the financial management laws, and you certainly can't do it under the Constitution, that said you can keep classified projects off the books, which means you can cook the books. You can basically do whatever you want. You can cook the books. Now, this matches up, Greg, with the waiver given to the National Security Advisor, who says that corporations, if he waives them, can also cook their books with the SEC. So now we have the corporations making money, and they can cook their books under the quote-unquote law, and apparently the government can too. So when the board made the statement and announced this new policy, they made the point that if they didn't do this, the only alternative was to redact the Department of Defense financial statements, which meant you would have to redact the U.S. government financial statements, which means we have reached Never Never Land, which means the whole thing is a joke. The defense contractors who work for the federal government and these budgets and provide all the products and services, you now have no idea what their financial statements mean, and you have no idea what DOD's financial statements mean, which means you have no idea what the U.S. government financial statement mean, which means they, as a matter of policy, they're saying you have to give them, for the IRS, for the Census, for all these other regulations, complete financial disclosure and honest financial disclosure by pain of law or you go to prison, but they can make up whatever they want. They can publish financial statements which are complete fiction with no accountability to you.
And call it national security. Call it national security.
Right. So you have, and basically what this is doing is this is engineering complete financial insecurity for every American citizen. This is the end of financial security. It's one of the reasons I just closed down my investment advisory. I still have my investment advisory company. We do investment screens. We no longer do individual investment advisory services because I don't know, in a world where the government is free to break the law and the law related to financial management every day, all day long, no matter what, and yet we are subject to, literally very time-consuming, very expensive and onerous financial disclosure back to the government. That is a hopeless situation. You either change the situation or there is no hope.
Wow, that is a stunning statement. That you can
right.
no longer advise.
So,
go ahead.
Let me bring this back to gold. I don't think gold's not having a good year, and I don't expect gold to have a good year, and I don't underestimate the ability of technology to deflate all real prices, including precious metals. But there is a reason the central banks all around the world are buying gold and stockpiling gold. There is a reason the Russians and the Chinese are buying gold and stockpiling gold. The Asians don't trust the West. They want gold. So, my favorite gold quote, and that is always have enough gold to bribe the border guards. Gold the push of the establishment is to get everything onto technological and digital systems. And that's so they have complete real-time disclosure of how your money works. I will tell you, if I call it the data beast, when most Americans look at the federal government, they see 21 different agencies. I see 3 contractors who have access to 100% of the data. I call it the data beast. because you have the same defense contractors running the information systems and databases, or the same telecommunications and information systems. And if you look at how they're running the information systems and the database, and the telecommunications, there is a database. And I swear, if you go in and look at the database, they can produce more real-time, interesting financial and economic reports on Greg Hunter and his family than you can.
I want to bring this up too, because that you say that, and it's you illustrated actually that this is your latest report. You said this is one of your best reports you've ever done. This is
one of the best reports. Yeah, and let me tell you why this is the best.
I got even though I have just the artwork here, you did send me the link to the report. That this is
right
on your site, and it's coming out, or it has come out, I think. It's very detailed.
Right.
It's very long.
It's up on the web. So each wrap up comes with its own website, and the web presentation is done. I still have to write the introduction. I'll do that this weekend. Then it'll go into a PDF form and a hard copy form, so people can subscribe, where they get print and digital, or just digital. So it depends on what you want. So, but the reason I say this is one of the best, one of my favorite writers always says, all the news while there's still time to do something about it. And even though I was warning people about this 20 years ago, we're going up the S curve now. And you need to know, I was amazed, Greg, when I did this report, how few people understand the tsunami that is coming towards them as Asia rises and their incomes converge with ours. And it's not just something that's going to happen in the marketplace, or something that happens in the geopolitics of what the global trade system is. It's going to happen in your neighborhood. It's happening in your neighborhood now. And it's going to affect the prices that you pay for everything. It's going to affect your rate of inflation. This really is a tsunami. And I've been struck at how, if you look at what the average American or member of G7 is focused on, in terms of what they think their risks are, or what they think change is going to be, they don't really understand this. They haven't looked at the numbers. Again, we're going from a world where not that long ago the American consumer was the center of the universe, to one where we're 1/10 of the Asian middle class. So this is a major, major shift, and it's going to have extraordinary opportunities and extraordinary risks, and it's going to be happening at the same time that the biggest technological changes in the history, certainly of our lifetimes, are rolling out. AI and robotics is going to rock our world in many different ways. So these two things are happening at once. And the reason I say this is one of the best we've ever done, if you read this, you will really understand what's happening, and it will be very helpful to you to figuring out what you do. And you need to do something. You need to know about this, and you need to adjust. You need to adjust in many different aspects of your life, including your investments. I did this after the space-based economy. I sat down at the beginning of the year. We did the pension funds for the annual wrap-up, and I said, what are 3 of the most important long-term trends to investment within the G7? One was pension funds, one was space-based economy, and one was the rise of the Asian consumer. And so we've done those. It's kind of a triple header, boom, boom, boom. And the 3 of those together, if you really sit down, integrate them into an understanding of what it's going to do to your world, it's going to rock your world. But it could, in terms of what it could do to your family health and security and net worth, it could make a huge difference.
You say that the Asians don't trust the West. And I know you say that the powers that be, the naked short selling, the fraud in the markets, the LBMA, COMEX, whatever, suppressing the price. But a lot of rich people, they don't care what the price is. You're telling me that they don't care. Right. They know how this ends, and they want it to end with them in control of gold and silver.
I think the American establishment, looks at the numbers, at the demographics. Demographics are so important to who succeeds. And let me tell you a very important demographic, or some of the important demographics I go through in the rise of the Asian consumer. One demographic is, if you look at estimates of how many engineers we're producing a year, or the G7 is producing every year, versus how much India and Asia and China are producing, it's multiples of 5 to 10 times more engineers every year. We're producing a lot of lawyers, Greg. We need to be producing more engineers. So just the sheer numbers. The other thing is their engineers in terms of innovation are not checked by the copyright system the way we are here. And so if you look at the speeds they're moving at in terms of invention on tech or AI, it's quite remarkable. The second thing I go through are IQs, and there's a lot of debate around the statistics, but the Asian populations are considered to have IQs of about 5 to 10 points higher than ours. And if you look at what's been going on in this country in the last 20 years with nutrition, with fluoride, with geoengineering, lots of other things, vaccines, I think there's been a really concerted effort to lower IQs here. So if you look at the number of engineers they're producing, the speeds at which they're free to operate, and the IQ points they have on the board relative to our population, it's scary.
It is good. I'll tell you something else and I wanted to bring this up at the end too, that everybody has the China miracle and all that. Of course, they are persecuting Christians there and burning Bibles and getting people to renounce their faith. So that's, and they just instituted a brand new dictator, Xi Jinping. That's a dictator for life. So there's a lot of drawbacks to China. A lot of drawbacks.
Oh, tremendous drawbacks. I just did a review on a book called China RX. I don't know if you've read it. It's amazing. You ought to get that author on your show. And it talks about how our entire pharmaceutical supply is highly dependent on China, and the quality control issues are frightening. So I have some pretty. I don't know if you know this. I studied Chinese for a year in Hong Kong.
I did not know that.
And I was just in Hong Kong last year. Here's the thing: the greatest China does not trust the West, because China was the largest economy in the world, and then they ran into the Opium Wars and the Brits, and basically the West used violence to reassert dominance, and then used the Industrial Revolution to sort of become the lead economy. So China's experience with the Western world is that we win by war and we win by violence, because that, in fact, is what has happened. And I go into that in this report. But the reality is that, to me, the great supremacy of the Anglo-American alliance, in addition to sort of the Industrial Revolution and military, was financial liquidity. So we have run the global financial markets, and we have been able to achieve the lowest cost of capital globally of anybody in the history of Western civilization. If you get into the financial engineering of what we accomplished, it's quite remarkable. But it all depends on people believing that we practice the rule of law. And if you look at what has happened with the bailouts and the 21 trillion, it is going a long way to destroy our reputation for protecting and really respecting the rule of law. Now, if I was just in Hong Kong last year, if you think the wealthy Chinese in Hong Kong expect the PRC to respect the rule of law with respect to the assets, they don't. They're moving money to America. So I don't mean to suggest that the Chinese are trustworthy in terms of rule of law, when it comes to private assets. But what this is going to come down to is, can the American alliance reaffirm their credibility when it comes to respecting people's property rights and the rule of law? What I see, if you look at our third quarter wrap-up, Control 101, what I see is tremendous deterioration on this issue. It's one of the reasons I brought up this Gender X question to you. So I think
I want to talk about that real quick. AI.
There's a coming moment, Greg, that has to happen here about whether the Anglo Alliance is going to really reaffirm the thing that made us great. And I would say that's our respect for property rights and the rule of law.
And I want to talk about the AI thing. I don't want to gloss over that. You're saying that birth certificates now in certain states have male, female, and X. And I immediately said, "Oh, that's stupid." And you went, "No, it's not." Why?
No, I don't. Here's why I think they're doing it. And this is, as Dr. Farrell would say, high octane speculation. But the single biggest issue on robotics, or one of the single biggest issues, is how do you replace a dramatic amount of human labor with robotics labor without hiccuping your deep state system? So the tax flows that go to federal, state, and local governments from the payroll system. And one of the ways you can do it, we just saw in encouragement by Western investors, Saudi Arabia awards citizenship to a robot. If you make robots citizens and then slip them into the payroll system, you can make a much easier transition flipping human labor to robotics labor, because you just slip them in and find a way with the corporations to pay the taxes, or you set them up as leasing deals, and then you use a leasing system within the payroll system. So, but to do that, you've got to be able to make a robot a citizen, and you've got to be able to have them, so you've got to get the birth certificates and the driver's licenses, et cetera, to recognize no gender, because it's going to be very expensive if you have to make girl robots and boy robots. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, so my guess is, looking at what they're up to, and the rollout of this is designed to make it phenomenally energizing for the deep state to roll out robotics and integrate them into the workforce at very high speeds. And if you look at the speeds at which possibly they can do it, it's extraordinary. It was just at the Aspen Institute last year, having a bit of a squabble with a venture capitalist who looked at me and basically said, look, we can replace every human employee in America with AI and robotics, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
That is truly evil. I mean, truly evil. Of biblical proportions, man, the beast, right?
Well, and make no mistake about it, the money that's financing this is our tax dollars and our pension funds.
Yeah, that's the 21. That's 21 trillion at least. That's only the DOD and HUD. That's 21 trillion at least.
Right. That's 21 trillion. That's 21 trillion. But then, we have $25 trillion of retirement savings. All that stuff is financing it too, Greg. Is one of the reasons I decided to do investment screens in my investment advisory. I said, we need screens that understands this and is able to really identify which companies, are not leading this.
Catherine Austin Fitts, I could talk to you for like hours. I always feel like I always feel dumb when I talk to you. Enlightened, but I feel dumb.
Not that you're back in New York things are working.
But not that you're. Oh no, I wouldn't want to be back in New York. I had to pretend to be surprised. Oh, I didn't know that was going to happen.
No, but but here's the thing. When I say that, what I mean, high learning speeds. So if we're going to get back in the race and get back to winning in this world, we need high learning speeds. And I'll tell you something. Whenever you interview with Greg Hunter, it ups your learning speeds.
I want to bring this up here. This is your so new. You don't even have it out yet, really. I mean, you have it online. It's Solari report.
Yeah, so you can read the web presentation immediately. Yeah. And we'll have the PDF and the hard copy. If you sign up for the print, we'll have the hard copy to you probably by the end of October.
Super. And I'll put some extra links on that you put on that prove your point about how the now the 21 trillion and the other trillions that we don't have accounting for that are missing. Undocumented whatever expenses. That we'll send you the links for that, and you'll give me the links for, of course, your sign up page. It's the Solari report. It's solari.com is the website. Catherine Austin Fitts, a fabulous interview. Thank you for enlightening us.
Greg, always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure and an opportunity. I love USAWatchdog.com, and I enjoy being in cahoots with you tremendously.
Could we get a hit between now and the end of the year? I mean, is that your prediction now? That you be careful.
Here's the thing. I think we are in for a very difficult, tense couple of months between now and the end of the year. And whether the problems pop out on the financial side, this is like the Pillsbury Doughboy. It's going to pop out. Is it going to pop out as war? Is it going to pop out as a geopolitical problem? Is it going to pop out as a financial problem? Is it going to pop out as all three? So, and the variability of what could happen is extraordinary. I think that's what's making life so difficult. So this is really a time to be prepared to rock and roll and keep yourself and your finances highly grounded.
Even if gold doesn't go up, gold, silver, stuff like that, I guess you would say do what the rich people are doing.
I'm a gold fan. Gold is one of the, to me, there are a few primary real assets that, so whether it's chickens that are laying eggs and making more chickens or gold, I don't like gold because it's sitting in the vault. But I think it's one of the core holdings. Real estate that's earning, or any business, if you can have skills in businesses that are earning assets. So I think now is the time to stick with real and to get as little, unless you have stunning inside information that you can depend on, you want to have as little leverage and debt as possible. So you know me, I love gold, but make sure wherever you hold your gold, the custodian relationships or where you've got it saved is absolutely safe.
Well, and also
So
silver.
I'm a gold fan.
And silver, you like silver?
Absolutely, silver. I'm getting reports, and I talked to you about this on the pre-interview. Silver is hard to find. So, gold's down 8% for the year. Silver's down 16%, but go try and buy a whole bunch of silver. It's tough. One of my questions, Greg, is are they trying to preserve silver for the industrial applications? So, and so a lot of suppression could happen to try and preserve that for the industrial applications. But I think, I like to have a blend of both gold and silver, and I think they're both just part of any sort of real asset basis.
Wow. An investment advisor that travels around the world. Literally, you travel around the world, and you're saying, yeah, hold gold and silver. That's what rich people are doing. So,
well, that's the beauty. When you travel around the world, there are very few things that every global citizen agree on. And one of the things they all agree on is gold is money.
All right, we'll end it there. Catherine Austin Fitts, again, the Solara report. Her latest report is The Rise of the Asian Consumer, Big Implications for America and the World.
Yeah.
Catherine Austin Fitts, thank you so much for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thanks, Greg. Have a great day.